Alright everyone, we start off today with another lie by the FBI. There's a link in the description. I won't bother archiving it. I'm not sure whether federal bureaus are actually allowed to delete their tweets because I think haven't they been labeled, important material to archive, like literally work with the National Archives? I'm not sure about how that works with bureaus. I would assume that would be a good idea. Anyway, the FBI lying again, this time about investigating parents for attending school board meetings and yelling or getting angry. They have. In many of these cases where we know investigations have proceeded, there's no credible threat of violence issued. There's no terroristic threats. There's no, hey, I'm going to kill you, you're harming our kids, or anything like that. That's the hyperbolic appraisal of the situation shown to the normies by the legacy media. They'll carefully cherry pick through the school board meeting, and they'll find a couple instances of parents that got hot under the collar and started shouting, and of course wearing MAGA hats usually. And then they'll say, well, look at how violent and depraved these right-wingers are. They hate education so much. They want women barefooting in the kitchen, and they want to lynch black people and stuff. And they're trying to take over the educational system. Meanwhile, it's actually a bunch of cultural Marxists doing that with critical race theory, etc., dumbing down standards and trying to make everyone subservient. At this point, for the first time in a long time, it's the left wing that's trying to destroy the educational system. I'm no fan of the evangelo-moralism of the 80s or 90s. It was definitely a problem, lingers on into the 2000s, well into them, under W, actually. Sort of peters out after that, and then the Marxists took over. I would point out that authoritarian systems, whether so-called right-wing or left-wing, they're all technically left-wing at the end of the day, they simply oscillate, but they all do the same kind of damage and set the precedent for further damage down the road. Let's look at what the FBI said. Christopherwray put out a little thing. FBI, in reference to the false assertions about investigating parents at school board meetings, FBI Director Wray told the House Judiciary Committee that the Bureau is not in the business of policing speech. Read more here. Of course, using taxpayer money to cover for their quasi-political activities. Wonderful. This is his exact statement. The FBI is not and never has been in the business of policing or investigating speech by parents at school board meetings. When there's violence or threats of violence, we're going to have to work with our state and local partners as we always have. Now, of course, if there is a credible threat of violence, if a parent shows up at the school board meeting and says, I'm going to bomb the school if you don't stop teaching my kid communism, or something like that, that's legally actionable. Of course, the FBI can look into that. It would make sense, although staties can do that, I think, competently without the FBI's help. It doesn't really need to involve the FBI. You could shrink it by 90% and remove 90% of its bureaucratic capabilities, and you wouldn't notice an increase in crime in the United States, just to be clear. I'm supposed to believe that the Bureau of J. Edgar Hoover has magically sanitized itself over the course of its history, and magically, at some point post J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI stopped doing what it was doing. All the bad guys went away, and now they are angelic warriors for truth and justice, and they really just genuinely want to help. Can you name a bureau in world history, especially those that are dedicated towards investigative activities, so surveillance and stuff like that, in which there has not been a misuse of power? I can't name one. Look at the NSA with Love Int and things like that. They were, using their spying tools to spy on friends and loved ones and shit like that, and it wasn't illegal, and it's still ongoing as we speak now. Do you think that the CIA with Coke running and all of the things that it does, and the CIA is ostensibly more ethical than the FBI at times, and at least when they're being abusive, it's people that aren't covered under the U.S. Constitution usually, unless it's running crack into the inner cities to kill off a bunch of black people. The FBI has been notoriously corrupt all the way through, along with many other bureaus. There's a varying degree of corruption. The corruption's there, it's just what proportion? Is it 10% evil? Is it 20%? In the FBI's case, is it 66.6% evil? That would be fitting. They're lying. They have been investigating parents for going to school board meetings and getting irate and stuff for things that are not legally actionable. No reason. A parent shows up and they get hot under the collar and they speak hyperbolically. Like, oh man, I'd like to punch you out or something. It's not a credible threat. They're saying I would like to. They may not be directing it at a specific individual or something. They're using heated language. It's hyperbolic. no reasonable prosecutor would take up a case against them and argue that that's a credible threat of anything, because it's clearly not. Spoken in the heat of anger, there's no follow-through, there's no attempt to punch anyone out or do anything like that. The person is being effectively linguistically non-committal in what they're saying. A reasonable person would not consider that a credible threat. They would credibly consider that person angry at the time. They go home and they have a couple Budweisers, or, well, at this point, probably not Budweisers under the circumstances, and then they feel a little bit more calm. They probably don't start loading hunting rifles into their truck planning to go and track down the school board members. It's unlikely. It's not a credible threat. A reasonable person would consider that massively unlikely. But the FBI will investigate anyway. They'll keep tabs on people, and part of it is actually it's the responsibility of the hall monitor class that exists. So you've got that parent at the school board meeting is carefully taking notes about who's saying what and recording things so that they can refer it to the FBI or something. Well, it's automatically going to trigger the person being looked into because it's a crime tip. They'll have a little dossier with that person's name on it. They may not trigger a formal investigation, but they will look into it. They will definitely look. So you're investigating them. It's not a formal investigation, but it's there. You still got paperwork on that person, correct? Because you get a new crime tip. So that's line number one. Line number two, we know that there have been active investigations of people who were involved in no legitimate crime. No legitimacy to the claim that they made a threat of, again, there's a difference between a vague threat. Like if I say, hey, America, I'm going to mount rockets on the moon with nukes on them and fire them down at New York City. Am I threatening the United States? Yeah, I'm threatening to blow up New York City. Is it a credible threat? No, I'm not going to put rockets up on the fucking moon. It's impossible. I don't have the means. I don't have the capability. You have to have the means to actually follow through with the crime, generally for the intent to actually be established in the first place. Of course, you could be delusional. You may end up in a psych ward you may end up getting red flagged or something for your hyperbolic statement, but you haven't committed a crime. The difference would be if it's directed at a specific individual, it could be considered harassment or a terroristic threat in that fashion because you're attempting to scare them, even if the threat was hyperbolic. In some of these cases, though, it's just very vague statements of anger. People have shown up at the school board meeting, some of which never attended one before the CRT stories broke, and they're complaining about communism being taught in schools. In some of these cases, the school boards are acting like complete jerk-offs. They're acting like jackasses. Well, we teach your kids. You don't need to be involved. Keep people ignorant, basically. Like, we want to keep your kids ignorant. Why are you trying to stop us? You should remain ignorant of what we're doing. They've done everything that they can to try to shield school boards from having to answer to parents. They're doing it for sleazebag reasons, subversive reasons in some cases, and out of ignorance in other cases. Some of these people don't mean to be malevolent, they're just stupid. Most of them, I think, are being malevolent when they engage in such behavior, though. Now, I think the average adult should know better. No, the FBI is lying here. We understand that investigations of this kind have been conducted. It's not just the FBI, too. People are getting looked into by the staties and shit like that for going to the school board meeting and expressing displeasure. They're treated as though they are a threat to society based on the fact that they disagree about the current educational system of the United States. For the FBI to use taxpayer money to type up a tweet lying to the American people, let's see the ratio. Oh, it ain't pretty. I wonder why that happened. Of course, they get ratioed on most of their posts because oftentimes it's like, hey, today we celebrate Waco Liberation Day or something like that. It's completely off the chain. You should definitely be following the FBI on Twitter because sometimes they say things that are so off the wall, it becomes unintentionally hilarious. That's about all. Peace out.